What is up, YouTube? Jason here, and I'm back today with another video, taking a detour from Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice to bring you a video on a very popular text, a very weighty text, heavy piece of artillery that gets loaded into the literary canon that is a warning and sort of a premonition of design. Many students will have to read this during their time in high school. It's sort of has become ubiquitous across high school curriculum, at least in the U.S. And that is George Orwell's 1984. So I've read the first 20 pages, so I'm going to give you a little information about Orwell himself, and then we'll jump into my reaction of the text, but also perhaps it coincided with a bit of summary, so I can, place the story or place my reaction within the proper context. So you have context to my reaction. And yeah, we'll just jump right into it, right? So this is published, well, first of all, George Orwell, that is a pseudonym for the real man by the name of Eric Blair. That is George Orwell's real name. He has something of an alias, a pen name. Eric Blair has a pen name, and he goes by George Orwell after a certain length of time writing, I believe. He eventually, I don't know if he outright changes his name, I apologize. But yes, so he has a pseudonym that he goes by, George Orwell. And 1984 is a dystopian novel published on June 8th, 1949. So, nearly a prediction of 30 some odd years into the future of what the 80s and beyond will look like, a totalitarian hellscape of mass surveillance and authority, right? That is, putting citizens in their place, and there is no room for individuality. Everybody must conform or be sent to prison camps or executed, right? So Orwell, I'll go over some influences, right, that sort of served as the blueprint for this novel. And if I am butchering these names, I do apologize, but you can just search, influences for Orwell, especially if you like dystopian style literature. Obviously, The Giver by Lois Lowry, that's something I know I had to read in middle school. Great piece of adolescent literature. You also have Eugenie Zamyatin's We, right? Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. Stalinist Russia, right? That's not a work of literature, just quite literally Soviet Russia, Stalinist Russia, okay? The KGB, and Orwell's own experience with the Spanish Civil War, where he witnessed propaganda and mass surveillance, okay? And it would make sense that Winston Smith works for the Ministry of Truth, where he is working, I assume, I'm only 20 pages in, so take this with a grain of salt, but working with in the propaganda sector, right? Especially if Orwell would have witnessed mass propaganda and surveillance up close. And from my understanding, he went to report on this Spanish Civil War and ended up taking up arms and fighting on the Argonne Front I believe it's called, and he joined the POUM, Workers' Party for Marxist Unification Militia, right? And he fought for some time. I read he took a sniper bullet that almost ended his life to the neck. I mean, come on, that is just, that's absurd. He survived such a shot. I guess it was very close to a major artery in his neck, but he managed to survive, and he managed to go on to write very transformative literature, right? Very prophetic literature. And you can read about his time, his experiences in his nonfiction work, homage to Catalonia, I believe is how I guess that's how it's pronounced. But that talks about that details this time, right? So yeah, jumping into the text, you have Winston Smith, right? And I believe one of the Green brothers, I watched one of the Green brothers on YouTube doing his summary and analysis, and he mentioned of this text, and probably the Green brother, is it John Green who writes? I'd imagine it's him, right? But I forget. Isn't it John and Hank Green? Anyway, one of the Green brothers, right? You can look it up. 1984 summary. He mentioned he makes the connection of, especially given the time that Orwell would have been writing this, we have sort of these two names linked, right? Creating something, contradicting names. You have Winston, right? Such as Winston Churchill, the leader, is it the British Prime Minister, I believe, who leads Britain through its finest hour during World War II, and circumnavigates oversees the circumnavigation of in the leadership. Steps in the leadership role during such a pivotal time and such a crucial time, right? World War II is perilous, right? And we know the horrors of World War II, but he leads Britain through that, and he's credited, I believe, as something of quite a great leader and also a great orator. His speeches are, he has many quotes credited to his name. So, yes, but then you have the last name of Smith, right? Such an ordinary last name, and a common last name. And, Winston Smith is, he's this, sort of sets up this scenario where you have these dual identities, these dual personas coming into play and battling with one another, I guess. He's something of a leader, but then he's also a common man. So there is the desire to do something more to overcome present circumstances, but then you also have the worker side, represented by the last name Smith, that just wants to conform, and especially just to survive, right? Conformity equals survival in such a totalitarian hellscape as Oceania, Airstrip 1, right? Which is modeled after London, okay? Anyway, yeah, so, and we learn about this, like, how he's also indoctrinated like all the other citizens of Oceania. We see this, especially it's glaringly clear during the 2 minutes hate that Winston sits in on at his work, I believe. And I'll get into that in a little bit, but it's said during that period that, he couldn't, no matter what, you have to participate, and you find yourself participating almost unconsciously. And So yeah, it's like I said, you have these dual personas sort of clashing, right? This inner conflict. Whether to be like Goldstein, Emmanuel Goldstein, and rise up and try to lead a revolution. It's something in him, deep down in his psyche, in his soul, is very unsettled by the present circumstances, by the current setting. He knows there's something wrong, but then it's also easier just to do his work and try to survive than to lead a revolution out of such a state, right? And then what? Of course, like it's one thing to lead a revolution, but then to set up a successful government, right? You see, that's why you see so many revolutions fail, right? Because after the overthrow of the government, then what? You party, but then now the real work begins, and the state just collapses in on itself because there's no planning and no real leadership to fill such a void, such a vacuum. Anyway, so yes, it begins April 4th, 1984, right? That's how, at least that's what Winston, that's his best guess as to the date. It was a bright, cold day in April. The clocks were striking 13, right? So, yes, of course, Orwell doesn't get everything right. We don't have after 12:13, at least after midnight, it doesn't strike 13. It's 0100, right? And then 0200. Of course, at 1 p.m., it's 1300 in military time. But but that's why I say it's sort of a premonition of design, of totalitarianism taken to its extreme, and you almost have to stop calling it dystopian once it becomes reality. Okay, what is so different from as Winston is making his way, right? Okay, electricity is rationed. That's why Winston, despite his ailment, his varicose ulcer on his ankle that is deeply paining him, and he tries not to scratch because he knows, I guess it will irritate him all the more. But he has to take the stairs up as opposed to taking the elevator because electricity is rationed. Okay? And not only that, there is a poster of Big Brother. I should talk about this poster. This poster, it resembles a broad, handsome face, masculine features, with a black mustache, a mustachioed face with handsome, broad features, masculine features. I can't help but think of Joseph Stalin himself being the one pictured on this poster. And I think perhaps when you Google Big Brother 1984 poster, you may see renditions of Stalin. So Stalin, of course, served as inspiration, as I said early on. Stalinist Russia served as inspiration. So yeah, this poster with eyes, you imagine these eyes that follow you, almost like the painting in an episode of Scooby-Doo, right? A Scooby-Doo villain whose eyes are like hiding behind the painting, and the eyes of this painting follow the Scooby and Shaggy and the gang as they like make their way around different corridors and whatnot. And it's the same sort of feeling, evokes the same sort of paranoia and fear, right? And then fear is used to control, to suppress individuality, but then also to control the population. And you begin to have a very uniform population, which is what the government wants. Anyway, so you have this poster that follows Winston up the stairs, eyes that follow Winston, I should say, that resembles Joseph Stalin. So immediately there is this sense that anywhere Winston goes, he is being watched. Anything he says is being heard. His movements are, graphed, documented, and charted, charted. And the state, the judge, not the literal judge, but like the state then judges for itself whether somebody is guilty of thought crime or is a potential a heretic or a potential traitor, right? Or has the makeup of a traitor. And so, yes, and the hallway smelt of boiled cabbage and old rag mats. And I said, at one end of it, a colored poster, too large for indoor display, had been tacked on the wall. It depicted simply an enormous face, more than a meter wide, the face of a man of about 45, with a heavy black mustache and ruggedly handsome features. Okay, yes. And he lives in a place called Victory Mansion. And you see a lot of things, right? The official language in Oceania is called Newspeak. Okay, and a lot of things are contradictory. That's where the term doublethink comes in. There are these contradictory beliefs that are allowed to live in one's mind because they've been indoctrinated and they've been brainwashed, and they don't have enough knowledge to have like a third person or a higher perspective on what's actually true, on what's actually going on. So these contradictions, this doublethink is able to blossom and really continue brainwashing people. And propaganda is taken as truth, right? As axioms that hold up society. And when in reality, they're really pillars, they're really mechanisms of control, mechanisms to indoctrinate and brainwash the society, right? And yeah, it's called Victory Mansions, but of course the hallway smells of boiled cabbage. And then when Winston finally makes it to his apartment, everything's sort of colorless, bleak. Looking out, you have vistas of 19th century broken down houses and apartments and rubble left from bombing runs, right? Perhaps carpet bombs, right? Planes fly overhead and drop series of bombs. And you have piles of rubble all over the floor, on the that makes up the landscape and makes up the setting, and then entire fields almost that have been cleared due to bombing runs. And so you have this bleak landscape, this bleak setting. I need to blow my nose. That is in utter disrepair. 1 second, sorry. This bleak landscape that is in utter disrepair, that is contrasted by the ministry of truth, the ministry of peace, the ministry of love, and what's the other one? The ministry of plenty. And they all do sort of the opposite of what their names suggest, right? So the ministry of truth deals with news, I believe, and the fine arts, and I guess propaganda, essentially. The ministry of peace, I guess, would obviously deal with war. One of them, I'd imagine the ministry of love, I think, deals with law and order, perhaps, and punishment, right? And then the ministry of plenty deals with rationing out just enough food to keep the population from starving. Okay, so very on the line with subsistence-based living. Okay, and what I also wanted to mention was the parallels between, you know, this Oceania, Airstrip 1, and present day North Korea. Watch it, read this novel, read a bit of it, and then at least read the first 20, 30, 40, 50 pages, and then watch a documentary about North Korea. I don't know what advances have occurred perhaps in the last 10 years, but it's closed off from the rest of the world. It's called the Hermit Kingdom for a reason. If you look at it from satellite images, essentially, everything is lit up sort of across the globe, at least most parts, except for perhaps uninhabited, the North and South Pole. But then you also, around China and around South Korea, around Russia, they're all lit up. But then you have North Korea. Like I said, which borders China and Russia and South Korea, all lit up, and North Korea stands in total darkness at night. And that is because that's how they want their citizens to live, is in the dark, unaware of the outside world and unaware of what life, the potential, the possibilities of life once you step outside of your dark, closed circle. And that's not to put down the North Korean people. I have a lot of respect for the North Korean people and their journey, their arduous journey, because you obviously have the famine of the 90s. And because when such a population is living so close to starvation, all it takes is a little hiccup, in the government, and millions of people end up starving, and people starve to death, and they end up eating grasshoppers and perhaps dogs and cats, whatever they eat just to stay alive. And anyway, this is not about North Korea, but anyway, there are a lot of parallels. Winston Smith, where he picks up his diary, where he buys it off the black market, which is technically illegal, but it's sort of overlooked by the government because the government understands. It's obviously wise enough to understand that people wouldn't be able to get some of the things that are essential to everyday life, such as more food or medicine or whatever, clothing to stay, whatever, right? Tools to fix things, etc. Without such a black market existing, because the free trade, the free market is technically illegal, but it's overlooked because without it, the people really would starve. And you need the backbone, you need the population to do the work that the government is handing out, so the system may continue to thrive at the top, at least. And so the people at the top, the leaders, right, the Kim Jong-uns, Big Brother, not only has somebody to watch, but so it can watch, right? So it has the privilege of being able to sit. What I'm saying is to sit back and to not do much and have everything done for itself. So anyway, yeah, but the parallels. Winston obtains his diary via the black market. Same with North Korea. They have a black market that is overlooked by the government, where people can get grain and people can get food and clothing, etc. Different items, normal household items that otherwise that the government is in a socialist paradise, right, as North Korea would have you believe, it is. They should be, you know, these things should be provided by the government, but they're in a socialist paradise, but they're not. Okay, they're really not, obviously. And I sort of digressed, but tried to do so to just, like I said, outline the the parallels between the two, how they overlap. Right, Airstrip 1, present day North Korea. You could also look at communist China. You could also look at socialist or Marxist Russia, right? Soviet Russia, Stalinist Russia. You could look at perhaps where America is heading, and people, you know, who never have lived in a totalitarian state and don't read up on one and don't have such an idea of one, don't even realize, maybe some other people do, what they're heading towards until it's too late. So that's why it's important to know. I can't say why I am personally so interested in learning. I mean, I have some guesses. I think it has to do with how I grew up. But there is something very endearing. It's sort of messed up, and it shows you how doublethink is able to exist, because I think doublethink exists to a degree inside all of us. But there's something endearing about people who all live under such a domineering, such a controlling government, such a dictatorship, such an authoritarian hellscape. They all have this shared trauma, this shared arduous journey that they're trekking through the mud of. And yeah, there's this commonality. You know, I can read the pain on your face, and when we begin talking, I know that you're going through something very similar to me, and that sort of joins us. You know, the empathy that can be fostered from that lets me know that I'm not alone, I guess. And I also believe in such a state, it forces the humanity out of us, because otherwise we starve, otherwise we die if we don't help not only ourselves but one another. If we don't pick up one another, then we begin to drop off, especially the people at the edges of society, the minorities, the poor and the weak and the sick. They begin to fall off first in such a totalitarian state, if people are not joining together to help one another through it all. But then, of course, you have people. But then, of course, what I was saying about the doublethink is that really endearing, or is that my idea? That's a bit. There's nothing perhaps endearing about that. If we can find empathy elsewhere, we don't have to be placed in a totalitarian state, and have all the same abusive father, as I'm saying, the abusive father being, the dictator. We don't all have to have the same abusive dictator, the abusive father, to understand one another and understand one another's pain. A simple conversation can unveil that, or a series of conversations can unveil that. So yes, of course, doublethink exists within me. It exists within you. Orwell was very insightful to coin such a term. Very smart to coin such a term, very wise. When you read this, right, it reads very vividly. The language is very vivid. The imagery is strong, and perhaps absolute at times, leaving very little room for guesswork of how, like I said, perilous really the circumstances are. And there shouldn't be any speculating of really how bad, how far this off the wrong, off the righteous path this society has strayed. There should be no, like I said, guesswork. And so, but yeah, the language is, it's very well written. And the theme, the conflict is palpable, right? The inner conflict of Winston determining whether or not to begin this diary, which is the sort of decisive act that this is not okay, and perhaps I should do something about it. I'm sure there are others who think the way that I do, who feel the way that I do, because there's all these, as he shares this equivocal glance, right? Because there's this, what the deciding factor, right? We learn the deciding factor, that sort of the straw that breaks the camel's back, that forces Winston to pick up the pen and begin the diary, right? You have the telly screen, I forgot to mention. That is the TV that sort of sees and watches all. It can be turned down, the volume can, but it can't be turned off, okay? So it's constant. He's constantly being watched, as I mentioned. But there's this alcove in his apartment that it's speculated, I think, that it may have been where bookshelves used to sit. Of course, I don't know what books they're allowed to read, but perhaps all literature, I'm not sure of all literature, but any books that, you would imagine, they're going to be illegal. That's what a totalitarian state does, is they ban books, they ban anything that is not in line with the ideology of the state, right? Read The Ideological State Apparatus by Louis Althusser, and you will learn the mechanisms of control that a totalitarian state, a dictatorship, uses. It's not just about like manhandling the population, right? It's not just about physical dominance over the population, but it's also about engineering a network of control, a network of government doctrine, government ideology into every facet of life. Anyway, what was I getting at? Oh yeah, so he shares this, it said, equivocal glance with O'Brien during the 2 minutes hate at his job. And there was something in this glance, and it's said, it's very well put, right? That's why I'm saying all the great writers really get down to the nitty-gritty of scenarios that transpire really in everyday life, and they understand them on such a deep level. He said that, he's shared this equivocal glance, which uncertain glance, that O'Brien, he shares this glance with O'Brien. They lock eyes for just a moment, a fleeting moment, and it tells Winston that O'Brien feels the same way. And if a man such as O'Brien, I think O'Brien holds a position of power in the Ministry of Truth, perhaps or a managerial position. I'd have to reread. So he's not just another cog. He is, but he's a bigger cog than perhaps Winston, maybe. Oh my God! I hit the camera. Please sit down nicely for me. You can see I'm on a hill. We're gonna persevere, you guys. No cuts here. Okay. Okay, I'm sorry about that. So we're 35 minutes in. And this glance, it's Winston says like that's all he has is decoding these like micro these micro movements, micro aggressions, right, where people show their real feelings. Their real feelings are unearthed or can be witnessed, can be observed for just a second, milliseconds even. And then obviously they must they must don the mask once more, so their real feelings are not unearthed and they can't be thrown in prison. So that's why you have everybody. It's reminiscent of, Saddam Hussein, the video of Saddam Hussein when I believe perhaps when he initially takes power and he calls out all these members of the party who go on to be executed, traitors of the party or whatever. Or I believe it happens in the Saddam, but especially there was also a story, I think, about Stalin. A story out of communist Russia where nobody wants to be the first person, no follower wants to be the first person to stop clapping in a dictator's assembly. And yeah, right, like I don't know if the first person was like arrested or there was some story where some person stopped clapping too early and they were arrested for this. But yeah, it's sort of everybody shares in this manufactured hate for Eurasia during the 2 minutes hate. And Emmanuel Goldstein, who sounds like a sheep, right? He has this bleeding voice, it's said. And he, like I said, more evidence of Orwell's talent as a writer, weaving this symbolism into the characters. As I mentioned with Winston Smith, the dichotomy between his first and last name. The extraordinary man mixed with the common man. And great leaders understand the common man. Especially, a lot of great leaders were once a common man, and they understand the plight of the common man. When somebody is, you have nepotism and somebody comes from wealth, they're twice removed from the struggles of an everyday person. And anyway, I'm digressing again. But yeah, Goldstein sounds like a sheep, and you think of a sheep as like, you call somebody a sheep if they're a follower, right? If they swallow the doctrine whole, if they're a conformist at their core, you call somebody a sheep, a follower. Also, maybe they're trying to dehumanize him by calling him a sheep, but also like it's the total opposite. He's a revolutionary. He sees through the bullshit, I guess, for lack of a better word, right? And he doesn't want to masquerade as a conformist any longer. So obviously Emmanuel Goldstein is the first, and he writes this book, and this is a piece that, this is a banned book. Of course, it's an illegal text to own, but he writes about all what he believes should exist, what society should be, how society should be modeled. And you have the freedom of press, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, basic human rights, that exist within our Constitution, right? And it should be said that Orwell was a democratic socialist, as far as I understand it, used democracy to achieve a socialist state, I guess. And why can't those two things coexist? They should be able to. But of course, people don't view it that way. Anyway, what was I saying? So, yeah, the symbolism of, he's something of a follower. He's a sheep, right? His voice sounds like a sheep. Also, he has these Jewish features, which, of course, we know how the Jewish population was treated during the 1930s and 40s, how they were looked upon by a certain leader in Germany, Adolf, right? So high I cannot see Adolf. That's Mac Miller. Sorry, I watched a few TikToks of Mac Miller the other day. It really made me miss Mac Miller and his music. Anyway, I keep digressing. So yeah, like I think the symbolism is rich there, right? And it's representative. It represents Orwell's talent as a writer and his deep understanding of humanity and the human plight, and how governments, how people in positions of power will work to dehumanize the opposition. And you see evidence of this all the time. Especially, something just occurred within our, our society. The current president posted a photo of the Obamas depicted as, I believe, primates or gorillas or something. Very racist, very bigoted, meant to dehumanize. At least that's, regardless of the intention, that's what it does. And that's how racism of African Americans sort of always would do that, right? Anyway, so yeah, so Goldstein's sort of dehumanized, but then he's also made out, he's a sheep, his voice is bleeding, he sounds like a sheep, he's a follower, I guess. And perhaps anybody who listens to him is this wrongdoer, this follower of a diseased way of thinking. And also the other person I should make mention of is this dark-haired woman with this sash that she wears across her waist. The is it the Anti-Sex League, I believe. I think I read that her name is Julia. So let me just find this passage. Okay, if I can find it. Yeah, here we go. So he talks about during this 2 minutes. I should finish. Yeah, that is like the glance that there are others that feel the way he feels is sort of the decisive act, the deciding moment that inspires Winston to pick up a pen and create this diary where he scribbles "down with Big Brother" over and over, this refrain, "down with Big Brother," unconsciously. At first, he's having trouble saying writing down what needs to be said, and he says, all he really has to do is let loose and let this internal monologue that is, sort of on a loop inside of his brain. He just needs to let it out. It's, you'd imagine, hopefully it's cathartic for him, but of course, then he just has to step out and, don this mask that puts his real inner feelings at odds with his reality that he must live. Anyway, so yeah, that is sort of the deciding factor that tells Winston, there are other people, and perhaps even people in power, that think the way that I do, right? They're at the Ministry of Truth, the white pyramid, like I said, that stands in such a strong juxtaposition to the disrepair, right, and the bleak landscape, the vistas of sort of broken down, old, grimy 19th century houses. But then you have this white pyramid, these out of clean white concrete terraces that are cascading down 300 meters up into the sky, so rising above all the rubble. And of course, these are the four pillars of the government, right? The four sectors of the government that it sort of rests upon, that allows it to keep, like I said, the population following orders. Anyway, so there is this dark-haired girl that Winston has this he has this great suspicion of, that she may be a member of the thought police. As I mentioned, there's something called thought crime. I believe, hopefully I mentioned it. I've only read 20 pages, so I don't know how thought crime, how that technology works, that they can actually hear thought. But Winston says, you can never be sure if they're listening or not listening, if they're watching or not watching. So essentially, you have to live as though you're always being watched. And that is the same idea behind Michel Foucault's panopticism, right? And the panopticon jail. I've mentioned it before. I'm not going to get into it, but too much. The panopticon, the jail itself, if we imagine the perimeters of the jail as the book here, you have the guard tower in the middle, and the cells line all around here, right, surround the guard tower, and the guard tower stands in the middle. And the cells are made of clear plexiglass or some see-through transparent material. No square inch of the cell cannot be observed. Lights, however, shine from the guard tower, illuminated by the guard tower, shine into all the cells so they can't see out. But the guard positioned at the top of the tower, who's on watch, can see in. So you can never be sure, and he has a 360 panoramic view of all the cells, right? He can see into all the cells. Of course, he can't watch every single cell at one time, but because the inmates can never be sure if they're being watched or not, they have to live as though with the presupposition that they're always being watched. And so what do? They begin to self-discipline, self-regulate. And that is what the citizens of Oceania are doing. They're self-regulating. They're self-disciplining because they can never be certain if they're being watched or not. They can never be certain if a thought is going to lead to the thought police coming in the middle of the night to arrest them, to throw them into a camp, to execute them, should the crime warrant it. And yeah, so I think I'll just get into. So yeah, that's sort of the outline of thought crime. And the thought police. They're somehow patrolling thoughts. They're monitoring thoughts for deviations. And should they sense one, there's different, there's, selectors, right? Such as Ed Snowden or whatever in the NSA. You select one person over here to listen to for a moment, and like I said, you can never be certain if you're being watched, if your thoughts are being monitored. So you live as though that you're always being watched, and that's hard to break. That's hard to break out of. That's going to inspire deep paranoia and deep fear. And fear allows government to control the population, even though the government's severely outnumbered. It is the fear in the heart that has been, placed in the heart of man. The fear and doubt that prevents uprising. So let me read you this passage, and then I'll begin to wrap things up. This is about the woman, the dark-haired woman with the anti-sex league sachet, whatever, wrapped around her waist. She's an attractive woman, a woman. She's young. She's an attractive young woman. I'd imagine younger than Winston. But so it was even possible at moments to switch one's hatred this way or that way by a voluntary act. Suddenly, by the sort of violent effort with which one wrenches one's head away from the pillow in a nightmare, Winston succeeded in transferring his hatred from the face on the screen to the dark-haired girl behind him. Vivid, beautiful hallucinations flashed through his mind. He would flog her to death with a rubber truncheon. He would tie her naked to a stake and shoot her full of arrows like Saint Sebastian. He would ravish her and cut her throat at the moment of climax. What writing? To cut her throat at the moment of climax. Jesus, beginning to sound a bit Dahmer-esque, right? Okay, but, this is the hate that is in his heart that is flowing out, right? That is being expressed in the writing here. He hated her because she was young and pretty and sexless, because he wanted to go to bed with her and would never do so, because round her sweet supple waist, which seemed to ask you to encircle it with your arm, there was only the odious scarlet sash, aggressive symbol of chastity. Right? That is where his hatred's coming from. Even though he says that you can switch your hatred, which is another interesting thing, It's like you can sort of do this. You can trick your mind into being sad about something. Perhaps that is sad, but it's not like at the present moment making you cry, but there are these deep feelings inside of you that hold on to this, that associate this instance with sadness, right? With grief, whatever, with sorrow, with melancholy. I can listen to a sad song, and that will sort of excavate these feelings inside of me, and this sentimentality is sort of released through it follows the harmony, it follows the melody like a guide, eventually coming to the surface, coming to the forethought, coming to my conscious, and somehow, and then tears begin to flow. And you can think about different things, and you can point your sadness in a particular direction. You can do this with hate too, if you manage to work yourself up. So I guess just like listening to a sad song, you could watch, something that makes you jealous, makes you envious, something that you hate. Usually when you hate something, it's revealing something about yourself that's perhaps inadequate, that you stand on uneven ground with others. Perhaps, if you're watching videos, TikToks of if you're a man watching videos of attractive women, happy couples, and this is making you, for some reason, and you're like, I hate you, you have this disgust towards this young, beautiful woman. And you yourself, why, you have to ask yourself, why is that? Where is that coming from? Well, perhaps like Winston, you feel as though you can never acquire such a person, and that makes you hate them, right? And yeah, so that's what I was when he was talking about this hate that he felt for her that initially he couldn't pinpoint. I sort of instinctively knew, like, this, he must love her, he must find her very attractive, but where he'd like to put his arm around her, she wears this emblem of chastity that suggests that really says to all onlookers, I am not, and will never be available to you. I will never be available to serve the male gaze, to serve the male masculine sexual desire, or whatever, any type of sexual desire, not just perhaps male, but yeah. So, and I just thought that was also really strongly, vividly written. We get these images that flash before us, of Winston sort of defiling her and flogging her and beating her, and also mixed in with sort of sexuality, right? Expressed, or sex, right? Being sort of evoking, sensuality, I guess. Violence and sensuality sort of commingling. And yeah, it's that hatred that he feels, because he can't acquire her, right? He can't have her. But it's not only that, it's the fact that there is no possibility of ever doing so, I think, which is so unsettling, which really inspires this hate. And so then it says, the hate rose to its climax. The voice of Goldstein had come in actual sheep's bleat, and for an instant the face changed into that of a sheep. Then the sheep face melted into the figure of a Eurasian soldier who seemed to be advancing, huge and terrible, his submachine gun roaring and seeming to spring out of the surface of the screen, so that some of the people in the front row actually flinched backwards in their seats. But in the same moment, drawing a deep sigh of relief from everybody, the hostile figure melted into the face of Big Brother, black-haired, black-mustachioed, full of power and mysterious calm, and so vast that it almost filled up the screen. Nobody heard what Big Brother was saying. It was merely a few words of encouragement, the sort of words that are uttered in the din of battle, not distinguishable individually, but restoring confidence by the fact of being spoken. How beautifully is that written? How insightful is that, right? And sort of the metaphor that is used there, right? That it's not even the words themselves that are comforting to the viewers, right? To Winston and the people around him at the Ministry of Truth, watching this program, watching the propaganda. It is just the fact of the words being spoken by a figure of authority that the population knows that has their backs, right? And just like in battle, like if you're a commanding officer, you see, maybe you can't hear what he's saying over the sound of artillery and gunfire, but it's in his expression. You can read it on his face that he still has hope, and you draw strength from that hope, right? And that's the problem with this, right? That They create the propaganda, paints this picture that you have an enemy that wants to destroy you, that also lives amongst you, that may come to kill you in your sleep, that could drop bombs on you if Big Brother wasn't there to serve and to protect you. And, you know, and so Big Brother is obviously this protector of sorts, this this symbol, this emblem of protection, this emblem of hope, I guess. But that's all created through this propaganda, right? That everybody's watching, but we know then the face of Big Brother faded away again, and instead the three slogans of the party stood out in bold capitals. And here you have the doublethink, right? War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength, right? So war is peace. If we're at war, that means our nation is at peace. That means we can sleep easy because we're conquering our enemies. And we're conquering those who think differently. We're fighting, the ideological battle has been has manifested into a real outburst of violence, right? And we're conquering our enemies so that we may erect on the rubble an edifice of totalitarian seed that may germinate and grow right into a further, like, more expand, right? Expansion of the totalitarian state. Sorry, freedom is slavery, right? If we are slaves, if we do as Big Brother says, that is how we are set free. That is how we may learn and grow and find ourselves, right? And that is how we may experience the ecstasy that freedom has to offer if we do as Big Brother says and we are its slaves, right? And we allow our bodies and minds to be harvested and be cultivated by the Leviathan that is Big Brother. Ignorance is strength. So if we don't ask questions, if we remain in the dark, and if we don't try to have conversations with one another about anything bad going on, right? If we only talk about what's sort of deemed socially acceptable, that is in the decorum, right? That would uphold the decorum of Oceania, and that would sort of, like I said, be expected of citizens. Then we are strong. Then we are unified. If we stand in ignorance to what is really going on and what is going on around us. That is how we are strong. That is where we draw strength from, is ignorance. So there you have instances of doublethink. And like I said, doublethink is a mechanism of control that allows Big Brother to control the population. And of course, the population is just an extension of the government. That the government utilizes to get what it wants. And what it wants is mass surveillance, and a population that essentially exists to live like robots, sort of doing what the government asks, and sort of a series of uniformed robots who go to work, do whatever activities have been pre-approved, and live in service of the upkeep of the greater society, right? Of the upkeep of the government, right? And Big Brother. And yeah, that's about where I ended, right? So I'm loving this novel. I'm gonna go read more of it. I wanted to read it because it's such such a cornerstone text in the high school curriculum, and I recently started substituting, so I want to have this work under my belt, and I want to have a deeper understanding of this work, and of totalitarian society, and when fiction begins to resemble reality, especially a fictional work about a dystopian society that controls citizens, that is the puppet master, and controls citizens through re-education, through enforced labor camps, and through attempting to arrest its way out of potential uprising, right? To try to arrest its way out of its problems, right? Out of its own failures in design. You have a problem, okay? You have a real problem with something has gone critically wrong. And we need to educate ourselves on what a totalitarian state really looks like, and how one behaves, and how one achieves total and absolute control over the population, and how the population contributes to the government's upkeep and contributes to its own enslavement. How are you contributing to your own enslavement? Do you like your own enslavement? Do you like being controlled? Of course, it makes it sometimes easier to live life if you don't have to think for yourself. Of course, you have people who serve long prison sentences, who become institutionalized. Everything's done for them. Not every, you know what I mean. Like everything's a very strict regiment, and very strict guidelines that one must follow. And once all this freedom hits, or like given all this freedom, all of a sudden, like you sort of don't know what to do and don't know where to turn, and you're a bit anxious, and whatnot. And that it's a sad truth of inmates convicts who serve long prison sentences. But yes, anyway, you may read 1984 and think this sounds so, maybe not, but you may think this sounds so otherworldly. But really, it's not. It's a premonition of design, of a totalitarian state of the future. And although Orwell didn't get everything right, and there is no Oceana, in some sense, no thought crime yet, no thought police. No thought crime can be committed because there is no thought police yet. We have places in this world that do positively exist, that monitor and treat their citizens, like machines, like they are simply there for the purpose of serving the government and being farmed. Their life force being farmed, utilizing them for their work labor, and that's all. They are not meant to be an individual. They are not meant to develop their own thoughts. They are not meant to criticize the government. They are there to serve their purpose, and once they can no longer do that, they may as well be dead, right? Like I said, the parallels between Oceania, Airstrip 1, and North Korea are conspicuous, are obvious, right? So yeah, thank you guys. I'll be making more videos. I don't want to keep going. I'm already at an hour 10 minutes. This is a long video for me, but this is such a rich text, and I'm looking forward to reading more in the coming days. So yeah, thank you guys. I'll see you.